So amphetamines, they take effect once they enter the brain. So like other stimulants, they affect a part of the central nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is going to control all of our involuntary activities of the glands, the organs, and other parts of the body. This is what's responsible for that fight or flight response. The physical changes, such as increased heart rate, blood pressure, and breathing, that make us more alert, aware, and prepared for action. The drugs are then carried to the brain in the user's blood. So, amphetamine is highly soluble in lipids, the fatty acids that are inside of the blood. So, this means that it dissolves quickly in the bloodstream and then it's distributed around the body's organs. And because amphetamine is dissolved so quickly, it crosses the blood-brain barrier very easily. Amphetamine that's smoked or inhaled, it's going to enter the bloodstream via the lungs, and the lungs contain thousands of tiny air sacs called alveoli, which are surrounded by the capillaries, which are these tiny blood vessels. The walls of the alveoli are thin, so that oxygen from breathed in air can pass through it into the capillaries and then into the bloodstream. So when someone smokes or they inhale amphetamines, it's going to pass into the bloodstream with that oxygen and it's going to reach the brain almost immediately. So amphetamine that's injected straight into the bloodstream is also going to reach the brain almost immediately. By contrast, amphetamines that are swallowed, they're absorbed through the intestine before being broken down and passing into the bloodstream. So this process is going to take about 20 minutes or longer, considering if there's like food or something in the stomach. So the drug doesn't reach the brain and the person does not feel its effect until about 20 minutes or so after ingesting it. When people snort amphetamine powder, this drug gets into their bloodstream through the membranes of their nose. So the blood-brain barriers, so these tiny blood vessels called capillaries are going to carry the blood and therefore the oxygen to the brain. So these capillaries are going to be lined with these tightly packed layers of cells that prevent a lot of substances from crossing into the brain and causing damages. So amphetamine is lipid soluble. In other words, it dissolves in the blood's fatty acids. So it's able to cross that barrier and enter into the brain. And then when people smoke or they inhale amphetamine, the drug is going to enter their lungs and pass into the bloodstream via the capillaries that surround the alveoli. So people take amphetamines in order to feel more confident, more alert, more energetic, as well as for that sense of well-being. However, in large doses or regular use, it can cause a lot of unpleasant side effects, including addiction and dependence. So addiction is when the body becomes so used to functioning with that drug present that it cannot function correctly without it. And then dependence is when taking the drug becomes so much a part of our lives that we feel we can't stop even though it's harming us. And when people are taking amphetamines regularly, they're going to sleep less, eat less, use more energy than normal, and this can lead to them becoming tired, anxious, possibly constipated. And since the body's systems slow down, they're going to become less able to carry out those normal functions. A lack of food can lead to malnourishment, and it also affects the immune system or the body system of fighting and protecting itself against infection. So this makes amphetamine users more likely to succumb to illness. Lack of sleep also affects the immune system. So larger doses of or a particularly strong form of amphetamine, like a methamphetamine, it can result in headaches, sweating, dizziness, irregular breathing, mental confusion, loss of coordination, and these large doses can also cause a stroke. This is when a blood vessel in the brain bursts due to increased blood pressure caused by the drug. So a stroke can leave a person disabled or they could even die. You may never take amphetamines, but you might go to places where other people are taking them, so you should know what to do if somebody has a bad reaction to them. So Amy, age 16, says, "We were going to this party to celebrate at the end of the school year. My friend Leanne had some speed, and she said we'd have a really great night if we were totally high. I was a little nervous, but everybody was up for it, so we all took some. And when it kicked in, it felt great. Like we could do whatever we wanted to, dance all night, sing, whatever. Leanne's brother Ollie kept shouting, 'I'm king of the world,' like in the movie Titanic. Anyway, we were having a great time, and then Ollie started getting shaky and twitchy and saying crazy stuff like, 'I know what you're up to,' and 'I know you told the police.' Then he started breathing really fast and loud, so we took him outside. I thought he was going to die. Someone called 911 and the paramedics came and put him in the ambulance. They took him to the hospital, and of course, someone called Leanne and Ollie's mom, so before long, all of our parents knew and we all got grounded. Fortunately, Ollie was okay, but the whole thing just wasn't worth it." So, what do we do when people have had a bad reaction after taking amphetamines? So, if they feel tense and panicky, we should calm them, reassure them that the feeling is going to pass, try to steer them away from crowds or noisy music and bright lights. And if they start breathing very quickly, calm them down and encourage them to take long, slow breaths. Speed and ecstasy affect the body's temperature control. So if people are using these drugs and they dance energetically without taking breaks or drinking enough fluid, then their body could overheat and dehydrated. So warning signs are going to include cramps, fainting, headache, or sudden tiredness. So if this happens, you might want to move the person to a cooler area, like outside. Remove any excess clothing and try to cool that person down by wiping that person with a cloth soaked in cool water. Get the person to sip 2 full glasses of non-alcoholic fluid an hour. Water's fine. Make sure they don't gulp it. But we also want to try to include some sort of fruit juice or sports drinks, which is going to help replace the minerals that are lost through sweating. And if somebody loses consciousness or if you're worried, call an ambulance and explain what has happened. Don't worry about the legal side of things. You're not going to get in trouble and you might save a life. Ambulance staff and paramedics are going to be more interested in treating the patient than telling the police that someone's been using drugs. Regular heavy use of amphetamines can lead to mental health problems like depression and mood swings. They can continue even after the use of the drug is stopped. So heavy users are more likely to suffer from these brief episodes of amphetamine psychosis. They might feel violent or aggressive and experience paranoia or delusions, and they might even hallucinate. A common hallucination is the sensation that insects are crawling all over your body. Some people have even made themselves bleed by scratching at their skin because of the non-existent bugs. This behavior has also been seen in experiments in which animals have been given amphetamines. We call this formication. And although amphetamine psychosis usually wears off along with the drug, it can last for longer and has been thought to trigger long-term psychiatric problems in some people. So violence, aggression, antisocial behavior, these are common with heavy amphetamine use. In fact, people working in the field of drug abuse say that there are more amphetamine-related deaths due to violent behavior than there are due to overdose. So many cases of domestic violence, suicide, and murder have been linked with amphetamine use. This type of behavior can be due to severe impairment of their decision-making ability and their general reasoning after taking the amphetamines. There are suggestions that the use of drugs by the armed forces has led to a number of incidences of friendly fire, so when soldiers bomb allied troops, and also collateral damage when they bomb civilians. So girls and women who use amphetamines, they might find that their periods are affected. There's little information available out there on how amphetamines affect the hormonal system, but we do know that female amphetamine users often find that their periods might be heavier or lighter, might become irregular, or they might even stop altogether. Also, because amphetamines dull the appetite and increase activity and often cause difficulty sleeping, they can affect a person's general health, and this could affect the period as well. So women who use amphetamines while they're pregnant, they're at an increased risk of miscarriage and premature labor. And babies born to amphetamine using mothers tend to be smaller and develop more slowly. Some even have birth defects when they're born. Babies who are premature or born too soon, they might suffer from a range of health problems. So those whose mothers used amphetamines late in the pregnancy may be born experiencing the effects of the drug. These babies might be overactive and agitated. They might cry constantly and just really be difficult to settle down. So these babies are born to regular users. They might suffer from withdrawal symptoms for the first few weeks of life. There's not much research available on the effects of the amphetamines on breastfeeding, but there is some evidence to suggest that babies who are breastfed by mothers who are taking amphetamines, they tend to be more sick and irritable. And women who use amphetamines and take contraceptive pills are at an increased risk since both drugs can cause high blood pressure. Drugs taken by a woman while she's pregnant, they're going to pass from her bloodstream into the baby's, and then the baby is going to suffer from side effects and withdrawal symptoms. Some heavy amphetamine users are going to inject the drug because they find that it heightens the effects. It gives that more intense rush. So people who inject the drugs are known as IDUs, which means injecting drug users. So injecting amphetamines is pretty dangerous because it tends to lead to greater dependence and it carries various health risks. Amphetamines are usually cut or they're mixed with other substances, any of which can cause blockages in the blood vessels. This can lead to organ damage. And there's also the risk of collapsed veins, abscesses, infections like hepatitis and HIV. And when people inject, these traces of their blood are going to remain on that needle and inside the needle. And if they're infected, someone else using that same needle is going to inject the infected blood straight into his or her own bloodstream. Repeated injection can result in collapsed veins. So these eventually are going to prevent that blood from circulating correctly. The area where the blood can't circulate might become swollen or turn bluish or even be cold to the touch. So if blood flow is severely restricted, the area right there is going of the skin is going to die, and then it's going to be the affected body part might have to be amputated or removed by a surgeon during an operation. So we call this death of skin tissue dry gangrene. Jay at age 19 said, "I thought it was safe. I was really pleased with myself when I got off heroin after 2 years. I was getting scared that it might kill me. I was clean for a while, but then I started doing a little speed just to liven myself up a bit, you know? Anyway, someone told me that you could get a really good rush from injecting it. That was what I missed about heroin. So I thought, well, it's only a little speed, isn't it? It's not like it's addictive or anything. But you start shooting up that stuff and you're as hooked as any heroin junkie. It's like you just can't stop doing it. Sometimes I'd be shooting up every couple of hours just to keep the roll. Then, of course, you run out of needles and you're not thinking straight, so you start sharing. Then I found out I was HIV positive. I don't know how I could have been so stupid. It was the main reason I stopped using heroin. Then I go and pick it up off of some speed freak. I'm not ill yet, but I could get ill anytime." injecting is so stupid. It's just a shortcut to the cemetery. Reduced blood flow can also stop the body from healing correctly, and so injection sites may become infected, causing boils or abscesses, which are inflamed, pus-filled swellings. Small scratches or bruises that don't heal correctly might become ulcerated. Ulcers are extremely painful open sores that can take months or years to heal. Tetanus is an infection that's caused by bacteria that live in the soil and in the intestines of humans and other animals. The infection can enter the body through injection. The symptoms are going to include muscle stiffness, headaches, and fevers, and if it's not treated quickly, it can lead to really painful muscle spasms, breathing difficulties, and even death. Hepatitis is a serious inflammation of the liver that can eventually trigger liver failure and cancer. It's transmitted through the contact with bodily fluids of an infected person. So people who inject drugs and they share their needles, they're at risk. HIV, or human immunodeficiency virus, is carried in bodily fluids, and it can be transmitted through shared needles and through shared sexual intercourse with an infected person. So HIV can lead to AIDS, which is the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. And when people have certain diseases and cancers as a result of their HIV infection, they are diagnosed as having AIDS. And some of these conditions can be treated, but at present there is no cure and no vaccine. But there is a pill out there called PrEP. It's relatively new. People who take it on a daily basis limit their exposure. Even if they are exposed, they're not as likely to get it. It's not 100% effective, but it's pretty high effectiveness keeping people from getting it. The purity and the strength of street amphetamines is going to vary greatly since these drugs are often mixed or cut with other substances like talcum powder or sugar or other stimulants like caffeine. So users really can't be sure exactly how much amphetamine they're getting and putting into their bodies. So this, together with the regular user's need for the larger and larger doses in order to get the same effect, means that the risk of overdose is high. So overdose is more likely to occur as a result of injection, since IDUs are likely to inject higher doses than other people might use. An overdose can result in these heart attacks or strokes, which could be fatal, unfortunately. So the number of deaths that are due to amphetamine overdose is currently lower than the death due to other drugs like heroin, but the figure does seem to be increasing. And amphetamine users, they're often going to use other drugs like sleeping pills or alcohol in an attempt to relieve the insomnia that's caused by the amphetamine. And they might then take more amphetamines to relieve the drowsiness that's caused by the other drugs. And this is going to draw that user into a dangerous cycle of uppers and downers, and it also increases that risk of accidental overdose. Some common signs of amphetamine overdose are going to include rapid or irregular heartbeat and raised blood pressure. Overdose can cause chills or fever and sweating, seizures, difficulty breathing or hyperventilation, nausea or vomiting, nervousness, irritability, aggressive behavior, overheating, dehydration, and coma. A drug overdose can be fatal, so the person needs urgent emergency treatment. So James, an emergency room nurse, said every Saturday, some people think it's clever to snort stuff up their nose or chuck it down their throats, often with booze. We saved their lives, while some poor kid smashed up in a genuine accident has to wait in the next room.